Hi, I'm Venus O'Hara and welcome to another video, day 21 of my 30-day challenge. And today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different because some of you have been asking me about my life in Spain and how many languages I speak, etc. So I wanted to share this video today about learning languages, and I'm going to share with you my 8 tips for learning a foreign language. I'm British and I speak 4 languages. I speak English, I speak French, Spanish and Catalan. I do consider myself to be quite a linguist, and I wanted to share the tips or the things that have really worked for me to become fluent in different languages. The first thing I think is very, very, very important is to have passion and curiosity. That's probably the most important thing. However, the tips I'm going to share with you are not really in any particular order. However, I do think this is the most important one of all. When I came to Spain, I had Latin fever. Oh my God, I was dancing salsa. I'd had a Colombian boyfriend. I was really, oh my God, I had so much passion and curiosity that this is what drove me, that inspired me to learn the language, I guess, and not get bored of it or not feel challenged and just keep going, even though some things were not exactly easy to grasp, such as the subjunctive. Oh my God. That's the most important thing. I was an English teacher when I first came to Spain. I was teaching English as a foreign language. The first year I was doing it in a language academy, so my students were people paying for their own classes, and they were doing it because they thought they needed to have English as an extra thing on their CV. And then the second year I was doing business English for very big multinational companies. And imagine, I was thinking, all of these people getting free English classes and they don't even appreciate it. They had this idea that they needed English for their work, but they weren't passionate and curious linguists like I am. And that meant that their growth and their progress was not very consistent. They kept making the same mistakes over and over, and they just were arriving late, just not very appreciative of the situation that they were in. And I was thinking, wow, if someone gave me free Spanish classes, I would be loving it. They didn't have the passion or the curiosity. They felt obligation, and that's not really a good reason to learn a language. The second thing is perseverance and consistency. This is really, really, really important. I've been in Spain for many years, and previously, before this, I lived in France, and I've seen many expat groups who've been in the country for a long, long, long time, and they never learn the language. I think it's so important to be consistent and have perseverance right from the beginning. It's so important, because some people think, oh, I'll learn then, I'll learn later, and they never really do. Or they do some classes for a while and then they just give up. And they're around people speaking their native language all the time, and they just never ever make progress, even though they are in this context, in the perfect environment to learn. So that's really, really important. You have to have perseverance and consistency. This is so, so, so important. And the third thing is, this is probably one of the most important ones, if I were to order them, is living in the country. That makes such a difference. I have learned French in England, and I learned a little bit of Spanish in England as well before I came. And I remember going to these Spanish classes for several months before coming to Spain, learning from zero. And it took such a long time to kind of absorb and learn and memorize some vocabulary, whereas as soon as you get here, that process of being a sponge when you've got the passion and curiosity, the perseverance and consistency, is much faster and much more efficient on your brain energy. It's incredible. And also, when you are living in the country, you're listening to it constantly. You're seeing signs all over. And I'm a huge fan of passive learning. For example, I didn't really need to learn the names of the shops. I just knew when I saw panaderia and I saw bread, oh, it's a bakery, supermercado, supermarket, it just became very, very, very natural. Or fruteria, fruit shop or grocery. So it was, I love this passive learning thing because I just love learning in general, but when it's listening to people speak around you, seeing signs around you, it's just a fantastic process. Because otherwise, when you're doing classes, it's kind of very isolated in a very unnatural environment and context. So yeah, living in the country is probably the best thing. And also you have access to more native speakers, which is very, very, very important, because you don't really have that when you're doing a couple of hours here and there doing a class. And one of the most important things as well, that these points are all really, really important, but if you do live in the country, or if you do spend time, because that's, even if, living in the country is not an option for you, you can definitely go and spend a week or 2 weeks or a weekend or something and completely immerse yourself in that culture. And what's very, very, very important is to actually speak that language all the time, right from the beginning. This is something that I've seen that people don't do. The fellow Brits that I know here, they come and they they're speaking English to everyone, then they're complaining about the locals not having a good level of English, which is just crazy, because they're in there. Why would they need to have that when they're in a different country? That's something I really find quite strange. But for me, and they also think, they have this perception that one day they're just going to change and start speaking Spanish all the time, or whatever language it is. And for me, I just spoke Spanish right from the beginning. Also in French when I was living in Paris. And even when I didn't know anything, I would ask some people, how do you say, what's the word for bank account? How do I say open? And I went to the bank, quiero abrir una cuenta bancaria. So I just learned the phrase and went and did it. And just whenever I had to do something specific, I learnt the related vocabulary for that task, and then I just managed it. And it's incredible what you can do when two people speak and there is the intention to communicate effectively. It's incredible how much you can understand if you really, really put your mind to it. So that's the most important thing, I think, is always speaking the language right from the beginning. You will learn so much, and it's the attitude that's very, very important as well, because otherwise you'll never make that change or that shift from your native language to the language of the other place. Or if you do, it's going to take a very, very, very long time. Another thing I did, which was probably one of the best things I did, is I got a notebook and I constantly wrote down vocabulary. I was so curious about learning new words every day. I didn't get intimidated by grammar, because that can be a very intimidating thing, especially languages that are very different from your native language. For example, in Spanish, the conjugations, the subjunctives, every verb has so many different versions. But it's good not to get lost in that and just learn the basics, just learn what different vocabulary is, because just different nouns, different verbs, different adjectives, and then and just kind of wing it, basically. But writing down vocabulary is one of the most important things, because I don't know what the actual statistic is, but I think it's something like, if you write something down, you've got 80% more chance of recalling it, and that's very powerful. So I always had these notebooks, and I would write down a vocabulary that would come to me in a natural context. For example, if I was in the bank, I would write down those associated words, or in a supermarket, or whatever. And I think that's really important as well, just to kind of write down those words as they come into your life. They might not be in a specific order, but it's about the context and just learning them. And then when you have written them down, you can revise the words of the day, the words of the week, etc. And then they become part of your vocabulary, because there are phases in learning languages. For example, at first you start recognizing and understanding words, and then once they get into your brain, your subconscious, then you start producing those words, and that's when you've got it quite well. You understand the concepts quite well, you understand the words quite well, and you're really making progress. Another thing is, because it's kind of like when you learn a language, listening to people around you, it's kind of like tuning into a radio station. It gets a bit, there's a few words you understand, and then as your reception gets better and better, then you start learning, you understand all of the words and even the filler words. But at first it's about learning those main verbs and adjectives. Well, verbs first of all, and because then you can also, there are always misunderstandings in language learning, which could be another video entirely. Another thing I did, which was one of the best things I did, all of these top tips are top tips. I did conversation exchanges constantly. When I first came to Spain, I met a guy who was doing a very important English language exam, and we did an exchange, a cultural exchange. He said all of the month of September, this is in Madrid, he would take me out to do different cultural excursions, and we would speak. He would pay for everything, and he would speak English to me. And then he said, in October, we can do the same, and we'll speak only Spanish. And I was like, okay, fine. So we actually did it. And just after being 1 month in Spain, I was able to have conversations, and then he would correct me. So we used to meet every Monday. And then the rest of the week, I found other friends to do conversation exchange with. It's called intercambio in Spanish, or échange de conversation when I was in France. And this was one of the most effective ways. So what that meant, what that was meeting with someone and doing, let's say, 1 hour Spanish and then 1 hour English, and then correcting each other, writing words down. That's a great way to actually meet people. There are also conversation exchange events. That's a great way to get socializing with locals as well. And because here in Spain, I mean, there are many locals who want to practice their English, and also many expats who want to learn Spanish as well. So it's a fantastic win-win situation. It helps you with your social life, and it helps you with that vocabulary as well. And what I did was I used to meet someone different every night of the week. And some nights it would be like talking about politics and current affairs on a Monday. Then on Thursday it was with drinks and going out partying. So with each different context, I was getting a whole range of vocabulary from different people, which was fantastic. And that really accelerated my knowledge. The next thing I'm going to share with you is lessons. That's actually the last thing I did. I did a little bit of English classes before I came to Spain, as I mentioned earlier, but that wasn't the main thing that got me into Spanish. I think it's very important to have that guidance from a teacher, but I was kind of, as a natural linguist, I already spoke French. It didn't seem like the most important thing to me. So I did Spanish lessons after 1 year in Spain. And at that point, I was already at the highest level, advanced level. So because I'd already made so much effort before then. But it's good to have lessons as well, but not to only rely on that. I think lessons is a good kind of support for more formal expressions of the language. Everything else is more conversational. But if you want to get into sophisticated grammar, etc., then definitely do lessons. It's also a great way to meet people and to correct any of your mistakes and have someone correct maybe your pronunciation as well. Because sometimes when you are learning a language, people are too polite to correct you, which can be really bad, because then it can reinforce your mistakes, which you don't want at all. So it's good to have to learn in a more professional, formal context as well, to iron out those mistakes and to learn correctly, and to also learn a higher level, a more sophisticated level of the language. Also, I think is really good, which I wasn't around when I was learning, are the apps. I mean, I know so many people doing Duolingo. I was doing Duolingo for German and I couldn't be bothered. But I think it's a really good app, and there are many other apps as well. So I think it's good to, if you're taking public transport, or any kind of time in your day where you can just, instead of looking out a window, do some language learning apps. There are many good ones out there. And I know people who do a little bit, 5-10 minutes per day. It's good to have that consistency, which was my point number 2, perseverance and consistency. So there are many language learning apps out there. Try one, do more than one, and keep doing it. And it's just fantastic, all these resources that we have now. You don't even need to buy a book anymore. It's fantastic. Then the last but not least would be TV and films. I don't have a TV. I just think TV is just like brain dead stuff. But however, I do acknowledge that having a TV is fantastic for learning a language, and also watching films in the original version is amazing. TV, I think the Spanish TV is absolutely terrible. There's this obsession with not saying that British, well, I do like British TV a little bit more, but here I remember watching adverts sometimes. It was like 20 minutes of ads in a film. And there's this obsession with kind of gossip programs and reality. Not that doesn't exist in other places, but if you're doing it, if you're watching it with the intention to learn a language, it can be very beneficial. Even the trashiest program ever can be very, very educational for you if you are watching just to learn a language. And also films. I think it's important to, on Netflix now, there are many good series in different languages that you can watch. And it's good to maybe start off listening to the original version and then having the subtitles in your native tongue, such as English in my case. So then you can kind of recognize some words. But then when you get a little bit better, it's good to have the subtitles in the same language as what you're hearing, because sometimes you can hear words but you don't know what they are because of the pronunciation. So that's something you can do when you're at a more advanced level. And also it's nice to learn a language when you are being entertained, which is kind of like passive learning, which is something that I am a huge fan of. So those are my 8 tips for learning a language. I am so passionate about language. And I just love being able to get to a point where I can express who I really am in a different language. And also it sounds nice. I think Spanish is such a sexy language. So is French. And some of my linguistic achievements have been, I've written my memoir in Spanish, La Máscara de Venus. I've written for El País, Spain's biggest newspaper. I've written over 100 articles in Spanish without having any formal Spanish qualifications, which is just pretty amazing really for a British native, English native. And also in Catalan, which is another language I speak, I won the second prize of the Toastmasters International Speech Contest, which was it just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. And I used to work for Catalunya Radio for 4 years. So language for me is just such a passion, and I understand not everyone has that passion, but passion is the most important thing, which was my first point. So what about you? Are you a language learner? Do you have any tips to add to these 8 tips? I would love to know in the comments below. And if you have any comments or any suggestions for new videos, don't hesitate to let me know, because I am determined to do 10 more days of this challenge. I think I'll do 31 days instead, because there are 31 days in July. And I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Thanks for watching.